for your children to be fed. So you're not crying because they're crying and they can't go to bed. You cannot pray for your medical bills to disappear. You cannot pray for the mold to stop poisoning your children in the classrooms. The other thing that frustrates me is people who have experienced poverty, who have gotten the straps for their bootstraps, who sit and talk about how we shouldn't do anything for the next person. See, as someone who knows severe poverty, I lived in a refugee camp, on the floor, no water, nothing. And I hear somebody say here...
In a deeply emotional moment, Ilhan Omar spoke about the harsh realities of poverty, reminding everyone that you can't pray away hunger or medical bills. Her words resonated with countless Americans who faced those same struggles. It was a raw, heartfelt message that connected on a human level, a reminder of how real economic pain shapes lives far beyond politics. But even as the story touched many hearts, not everyone was convinced. Some critics questioned whether Omar's emotional appeal was also a way to deflect from her controversial moments in Congress. They argue that while her personal journey commands empathy, her record as a lawmaker has at times created deep division, stirring debate both inside and outside Washington. Supporters see her as a bold voice for justice, while opponents accuse her of undermining unity and credibility with remarks they view as reckless. This tension came to a head when Congressman Chip Roy and his colleagues pushed for Omar's removal from the House Foreign Affairs Committee, a decision that set off fierce reactions across the country. The move wasn't just political. It became a symbol of how far the battle over accountability in government has gone for years. Roy and other Republicans argued that Omar's comments had damaged America's image on the global stage. They insisted this wasn't about religion, ethnicity, or personal bias. It was about defending national dignity and setting a higher standard for leadership. To them, her removal was a necessary step toward restoring trust, integrity, and respect in U.S. diplomacy. And that's where the real story unfolds, a clash between political power and public trust, between personal narratives and national image. It's not just about one lawmaker's seat. It's about how America defines its voice in the world, and who gets to speak for it.
Appreciate the chairman. I do associate myself with the remarks of the gentleman from Kentucky, but also the gentleman from South Carolina, the gentleman from Pennsylvania, the gentlelady, all the remarks that we've been talking about over here. And I appreciate the spirit of the remarks from the gentleman from Colorado. Would note that we're here for a very obvious reason. The door was opened. And now we're dealing with that. And the door shouldn't have been open. I'm reminded when I was in the Senate Judiciary Committee in 2005, and Miguel Estrada was being filibustered by the Democrat majority at the time. And we know why. We know this because a memo that said very specifically that he was being filibustered because he was an Hispanic conservative was found, but then shoved aside. We couldn't talk about it because it was found on a server, and they said, we shouldn't get it. There's a whole lot of backstory on that. But there was a lot of drama around that. There were 7 judges being held up: Priscilla Owen, Janice Rogers Brown, because she's black. That was all happening. We just sweep that aside. And you fast forward, and Bill Frist was being pressured to deploy the nuclear option. I remember being part of all those conversations, the Senate lawyer and the Judiciary Committee. Bill Frist decided not to deploy the nuclear option. In 2013, Harry Reid did deploy the nuclear option. 2017.
When Chip Roy stepped up to the microphone, his message came through with unmistakable clarity. This wasn't about revenge. It was about fairness and consistency. He laid out the context plainly, reminding everyone that it was Democrats who first set this precedent when they removed Marjorie Taylor Greene and Paul Gosar from their committee assignments in the last Congress. In Roy's view, Republicans were not creating a new rule. They were simply playing by the one that had already been written. Roy explained that this wasn't the outcome he wanted. But in politics, as he put it, We're not going to unilaterally disarm. His point was simple. If one party changes the boundaries, the other can't just stand by and take the hit. Fairness, he argued, means holding both sides to the same standard, even when it gets uncomfortable. This, he said, is what balance and accountability truly look like in a divided Congress. To drive the point home, Roy used a vivid analogy, comparing the moment to a classic baseball fight between Nolan Ryan and Robin Ventura, where one player finally stood up after taking a hit. It was a powerful image that cut through the noise of politics, capturing the idea that Republicans are no longer content to sit quietly while being targeted. They are stepping up, ready to push back, even if that means taking a few punches along the way. His words reflected the growing sentiment inside the House. The days of one-sided politics are coming to an end. Roy's statement wasn't just a defense of party strategy. It was a declaration of principle. The message to Washington was loud and unmistakable. If you change the rules, expect others to play by them too.
Then certain things changed at the United States Supreme Court. So now we live in that world. It is what it is. Now here we sit. The door was opened. I just went back and reread my speech on the floor because the gentleman, I hadn't done that yet. I went back and reread my speech on the floor. Not stand by every word of that speech. And in it, I referenced the fact that I had just a few months prior had been in agreement with some of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle with respect to January 6th, which there's disagreements on our side of the aisle on some of that with respect to the votes at the time, and that I'd taken very strong disagreement and sought apology from our colleague on our side of the aisle about some of the remarks that were said, but felt that this was not the right path to go down. I stand by that. So here we sit. I could associate myself and do with all the remarks the gentleman from South Carolina. I have very strong disagreement with a lot of the statements that Representative Omar has made. We've covered most of them. That some people did something is the one that really sticks in my craw pretty strongly. Raises a whole lot of flags for me. I think there are significant amount of justifications to raise issues with respect to service on the Foreign Affairs Committee, but I would not go down this road. But I'm also reminded, in August of 1993, Juan Gonzalez was a batter for the Texas Rangers and was plunked by Alex Fernandez from the White Sox. And just a little bit later, Robin Ventura.
Chip Roy didn't hold back when addressing his concerns about Ilhan Omar's past remarks. He specifically called out her controversial description of 9/11 as when some people did something, a phrase that struck a nerve across the nation. For millions of Americans, those words weren't just poorly chosen. They felt dismissive of one of the darkest days in U.S. history. Roy emphasized that such language doesn't merely spark outrage. It shakes the public's trust in those chosen to speak on behalf of the country. That single comment, he noted, marked a turning point. It reshaped how many viewed Omar, not just as a politician but as someone representing America's image abroad. To Roy and many of his colleagues, it wasn't about politics or partisanship. It was about protecting the dignity of a nation still carrying the scars of that tragedy. They argued that a seat on the House Foreign Affairs Committee demands a higher level of care, sensitivity, and respect for the weight of American history. Roy summed it up powerfully. Accountability isn't punishment, it's protection. In his view, holding officials responsible for their words isn't about silencing dissent, but about defending the principles that define the country. He framed it as a safeguard, ensuring that America's representatives speak with honor, not recklessness, especially on the world stage. The channel's commentary echoes that sentiment, reminding viewers that this debate extends far beyond party lines or ideology. It's about standing up to political double standards and restoring balance in public discourse. For years, many conservative voices have felt dismissed, criticized, or labeled for expressing their beliefs. Now, independent platforms are stepping forward, determined to challenge hypocrisy and champion patriotic values that millions still hold dear. Omar's removal, in that light, becomes more than just a congressional decision. It's portrayed as part of a larger movement for accountability and integrity in American politics. It's not about silencing anyone's voice. It's about ensuring that those who speak for the nation do so with respect, awareness, and unwavering commitment to the values that unite Americans.
Came to the plate for the White Sox, and Nolan Ryan was on the mound. And Robin knew what was about to happen. Nolan plunked him. And then Robin Ventura charged the mound, and then Nolan Ryan beat the crud out of him on the mound. That's what happened. We all know that's what happened. Old school baseball. Nolan Ryan defined old school baseball. This is raw politics. That's what this is. When the doors opened, then there's a question, and you have to decide what you're going to do. We're not going to unilaterally disarm. Just not going to do it. I'm tired of that. It just is what it is. Guys took a shot at someone on our team, about statements I disagreed with, and took very much to task. But I've got strong disagreements with Representative Omar. I would prefer, if it were just starting from scratch, I would not choose this path. I'd just say whatever stuff you all want to say. We'll say whatever stuff we want to say. Our managers will pick our team. Let's go battle it out in committee. That's what I would say. I would say that's the right place to be. But at this point in time, it is my considered judgment that, like Nolan Ryan, we've got to respond. And I'm just going to be blunt and honest about it. That's just my belief. I think it's important. And I hope we'll get through this. We'll kind of hip check each other. Maybe we can sit.
Ilhan Omar's record in Congress has always been a source of debate and division. Over the years, she's made several statements that critics believe reflect poor judgment, from comments that appeared to minimize the threat of terrorism to remarks that seemed dismissive toward key U.S. allies such as Israel. Her now infamous description of 9/11 as when some people did something became a defining moment, one that many Americans saw as deeply insensitive to a national tragedy that changed the course of history. Her approach to foreign policy, including her repeated questioning of long-standing U.S. alliances, led some to wonder how closely her views aligned with the country's core interests. Supporters defended her as outspoken and unafraid to challenge the establishment, but opponents viewed her tone as careless for someone entrusted with shaping America's global relationships. In the world of foreign affairs, every word carries weight, and that weight can have real consequences. Republicans ultimately decided that those words and actions crossed a line. They argued that serving on the House Foreign Affairs Committee requires not just intelligence and conviction, but also a deep respect for the sensitivities that come with representing the United States abroad. For them, Omar's removal was not personal. It was a matter of upholding accountability and reaffirming that political influence must be matched by responsibility. At the same time, Republicans pointed to what they saw as a double standard. They argued that Democrats were quick to defend Omar under claims of bias or discrimination, but just as quick to discipline conservative lawmakers like Paul Gosar or Marjorie Taylor Greene when controversy surrounded them. When Democrats called those earlier removals accountability, Republicans now asked why the same principle didn't apply universally. That's the hypocrisy Chip Roy wanted to bring to light. His message was simple and direct. If you make the rules, they must apply to everyone, not just when it's politically convenient. Fairness, he said, cannot be selective. For Roy and his colleagues, this vote was about restoring consistency and balance within Congress, making sure the standards of leadership remain the same no matter who holds the microphone.
And figure out by the end of this Congress, next Congress, whoever's in charge, we figure out how we're going to play ball going forward and set those rules. And I would say the same thing about open rules, closed rules, structured rules. And the ranking member could scoff. We've had X number of votes. We'll have continued debate about this stuff over time. There will be closed rules. There will be structured rules. There will be open rules. I'd like to have that debate. I'd like to have the considered judgment of the ranking member on that, and as I have debate on my side of the aisle. I'm just saying that we can figure out how to protect this institution and try to decide how to do things the right way. But in this instance, I'm going to be very open and honest about why I'm going to vote for this resolution. That's why. Again, recognizing the statements that the representative has made, I find to be highly problematic, extremely concerning, raising very serious questions from a foreign affairs perspective, as the ranking member has raised about statements made and how he feels about people being on certain committees over here.
Gentlemen,
I think we should, in my opinion, we should withdraw from that battle going forward and then let each manager pick their team. And I'll be glad to yield to the gentleman from Colorado.
and I would simply say I appreciate Mr. Roy's honesty. I mean, and again, could have similar to what Mr. Massey said previously, and not to belabor the point, because I think you've already conceded this, but why not emulate the same resolution that was used in the past?
This moment represents a turning point in how conservatives handle political confrontation. For years, they've absorbed criticism quietly, choosing restraint over retaliation. But that patience is wearing thin. Now, figures like Congressman Chip Roy are signaling a new phase, one where Republicans push back firmly, using the same rules their opponents once set in motion. It's not vengeance, Roy argues. It's about restoring balance in a system that's long tilted one way. The removal of Ilhan Omar from the House Foreign Affairs Committee wasn't just another vote. It was a declaration that accountability applies to everyone. No exceptions, no excuses. For Roy and his colleagues, this wasn't about party politics or personal animosity. It was about re-establishing a standard of integrity for those entrusted with representing America abroad. The message was unmistakable: respect the people you serve, or be ready to answer for your actions. Roy's remarks on the House floor revealed a deeper frustration, not just with Omar's comments, but with the double standards that have come to define modern politics. He reminded fellow lawmakers that when Democrats removed Marjorie Taylor Greene and Paul Gosar, they set a precedent. Republicans, he said, are merely following the same path. If one side rewrites the rules, Roy warned, the other can't be expected to play by the old ones. Behind the scenes, Roy spoke candidly about the process. He made it clear that this wasn't a trial or courtroom. There was no formal due process to debate. Instead, it was about mutual respect, the freedom to speak, and the courage to stand by one's words. He emphasized that Congress must allow open debate and disagreement, but also must draw the line when rhetoric crosses into disrespect. Politics, he reminded everyone, isn't about punishment. It's about responsibility. After the vote, Roy stepped before reporters with a calm but unmistakable conviction. He said this decision wasn't about scoring points or appealing to his base. It was about protecting America's dignity. Every time a representative belittles national pain or insults trusted allies, he explained, it weakens how the world sees the United States. If we can't respect our own tragedies, Roy said, how can we expect others to respect us? That statement struck a chord with many Americans tired of performative politics, of leaders chasing viral moments instead of real solutions. Roy's tone was measured but resolute. He wasn't interested in grandstanding. He was defending the idea that public service is a privilege rooted in honor, not entitlement. Meanwhile, Ilhan Omar doubled down on her defense. She claimed her removal reflected bias against her faith and identity, arguing that outspoken Muslim women are still unfairly targeted in positions of power. Her supporters echoed that claim across social media, calling her a voice for those who often go unheard. Critics, however, viewed the matter differently. They said this wasn't about religion, it was about conduct. They pointed out that other Muslim lawmakers have served without controversy, suggesting that Omar's difficulties stemmed not from who she is, but from what she said. The debate once again revealed how easily the concept of accountability can be reframed as discrimination, depending on who's under scrutiny. As news of the vote spread, public reaction split sharply down political lines. Progressive groups called it political payback. Conservatives called it long overdue fairness. Yet beneath all the noise, a deeper question emerged. Has Congress lost its moral compass? Both parties now seem more focused on moral outrage than moral leadership. Rather than fix problems, they compete to see who can claim the higher ground first. Roy's speech became a reminder that leadership is not about destroying opponents. It's about restoring principle. He didn't celebrate Omar's removal. He treated it as a sobering moment. Public service isn't a shield, he said. It's a mirror. That phrase captured the heart of his message. Leadership reflects the people it serves, and if that reflection grows distorted, it's the duty of Congress to correct it. Omar's personal story, from hardship to public office, remains inspiring to many. But Roy and others argued that even an inspiring journey doesn't exempt anyone from accountability. A powerful backstory can explain a person's views, but it can't erase the impact of their words. For those shaping America's global image, language matters. The media, as always, shaped how this story was told. Some outlets portrayed Omar as a victim of partisan aggression, while others framed her as the face of misplaced activism. Lost in the spin was a simple truth. This wasn't about identity or ideology. It was about conduct. When lawmakers turn into celebrities, The public loses faith in the system meant to serve them. Roy's firm but fair tone reminded everyone that Congress is not a stage, it's a responsibility. His message wasn't flashy, but it resonated because it appealed to something Americans rarely hear from their leaders anymore: honesty. The episode also reignited the long-running debate over double standards in Washington. Republicans questioned why controversies on their side draw immediate punishment, while similar incidents among Democrats are often brushed aside. Roy used this moment to highlight that imbalance, summing it up in one clear line: if fairness doesn't apply equally, it isn't fairness at all. That thought echoed beyond party lines. Many Americans, regardless of politics, share that frustration, a growing sense that accountability depends more on affiliation than on principle. For Roy, this fight was never just about one committee seat. It was about rebuilding trust in a political culture that has forgotten what fairness truly means. Today, as tensions cooled, analysts called this one of the most consequential moments of the congressional session. It wasn't merely symbolic. It marked a shift in tone, a reminder that words spoken in Washington ripple across the world. Roy's leadership demonstrated that accountability doesn't have to come with cruelty. He didn't gloat or humiliate. He simply drew a line, and in an age of outrage politics, that restraint felt revolutionary. Beyond Capitol Hill, public reaction remained intense. Some saw justice, others saw suppression. Yet nearly everyone agreed on one point: this moment exposed just how fractured political dialogue has become. Too often, people don't listen to understand, they listen to respond. Chip Roy's approach, though controversial, rekindled a basic truth: leadership must be earned through integrity, not noise. In a political era dominated by slogans and spectacle, his call for decency stood out like a steady voice in a crowded room. By week's end, as the headlines faded, the meaning of the moment endured. Ilhan Omar's removal was more than a political event, it was a cultural statement. It signaled that America expects more from those who represent it, that identity cannot outweigh accountability, and that leadership, above all, carries consequences. Chip Roy may have sparked outrage, but he also sparked reflection. His insistence on fairness, honesty, and national dignity revived a principle many feared was lost in Washington. The debate will continue, but the standard he reinforced, that words and actions must align with responsibility, will echo long after the cameras turn away.